The Blackthorn pack had not held a mating ball this grand in 30 years. Silver lanterns floated above the courtyard, held aloft by pack magic, and the scent of night jasmine drifted through the open doors of the great hall. Wolves from every allied pack had come, dressed in their finest, hoping this would be the night the Moon Bond finally found them. Elena Voss stood at the edge of the crowd, trying to make herself smaller than she already felt. She had no family name that meant anything here. Her parents had died when she was 6, torn apart in a border skirmish with a rogue pack, and she had grown up passed between distant relatives who saw her as an obligation rather than a daughter. She was an Omega, the lowest rank a wolf could hold, and Omegas did not belong at mating balls thrown by alpha bloodlines. She had only come because attendance was required of every unmated wolf in the territory, nothing more. She smoothed the skirt of her second-hand dress and told herself she only needed to survive the night. She did not expect to find a mate. She did not expect anyone to look at her twice. Then the doors at the far end of the hall opened, and Damien Blackthorn walked in. He was the alpha heir, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that made every conversation in the room falter for a moment before continuing. He wore his authority the way other men wore their coats, without thinking about it, because it had always fit him. Every unmated wolf in the hall turned to watch him cross the floor, hoping the bond would choose them. It did not choose them. Elena felt it before she understood what was happening. A warmth bloomed in her chest, spreading outward like sunlight breaking through clouds. Her wolf, usually so quiet and cautious, surged forward, with a longing so strong it nearly buckled her knees. She looked up, and across the crowded hall, Damien had gone still. His eyes had found her. The bond had chosen. Whispers rippled through the room, as wolves nearby began to sense it too, the way the air seemed to shimmer between the alpha heir and the Omega girl in the second-hand dress. Someone laughed under their breath. Someone else did not bother hiding their surprise. Elena's face burned, but beneath the embarrassment, something in her stood up straighter. For the first time in her life, she had been chosen by something bigger than pack rank or bloodline. The moon itself had picked her. Damien crossed the floor toward her, and for one trembling moment, Elena let herself hope. Then she saw his jaw tighten. She saw the flicker of calculation behind his eyes, the same look he wore when weighing decisions that affected the whole pack. He was not looking at her as a person. He was looking at her as a problem. "An Omega," he said, low enough that only those closest could hear, though in a hall full of wolves, nothing stayed quiet for long. "The Moon Bond gave me an Omega." Elena's hope curdled into dread. "Please," she whispered, though she was not entirely sure what she was asking for. Mercy, maybe, or simply to not be humiliated in front of 200 wolves. Damien did not grant either. He straightened to his full height, the way he did when addressing the pack council, and spoke the words that every wolf feared most, the words that could never be taken back once said aloud in a room full of witnesses. "I, Damien Blackthorn, reject you as my mate." The bond that had bloomed so brightly in Elena's chest tore apart. She had heard rejected wolves describe the pain before, but she had never imagined it would feel like this, like something essential being ripped out of her by the root. She staggered, and only pride kept her from falling. The silver lanterns overhead seemed to dim, or perhaps it was only her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. The hall had gone utterly silent. 200 wolves stared at her, some with pity, some with poorly hidden relief that it had not happened to them, a few with open scorn, as though her low rank was reason enough to deserve this. Damien did not look at her again. He turned and walked back toward the Alpha's dais, already speaking to his father as though nothing had happened at all. Elena stood alone in the middle of the hall, with the broken bond bleeding invisibly in her chest, and she made a decision. She would not collapse here. She would not give any of them the satisfaction of watching her break. She lifted her chin, turned, and walked toward the doors. Her steps echoed across the marble floor, each one steady despite the trembling in her legs. She passed wolves who did not bother to lower their voices as she went. "Poor thing," one woman murmured, not troubling to hide her judgment. "Rejected in front of everyone. She'll never recover her standing after this." "An Omega mated to the Alpha heir," another scoffed. "The moon must have made a mistake." Elena did not turn around. She kept walking, one foot in front of the other, until she reached the threshold of the great doors. She placed her hand against the cool wood, ready to step through and let the night swallow her humiliation whole. That was when the candles went out. Every flame in the hall guttered at once, plunging the room into darkness so sudden that gasps rippled through the crowd. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the sound of 200 wolves holding their breath. Then the light returned, but it was not candlelight. It was silver, cold and pure, pouring down from somewhere above the vaulted ceiling, as though the moon itself had descended into the hall. Elena froze where she stood, her hand still pressed against the door, as the light gathered and thickened at the center of the room, taking shape. A figure formed within the glow, tall and radiant, wrapped in robes that seemed woven from moonlight itself. Her presence pressed against every wolf in the hall, like a physical weight, an authority so ancient and absolute that even the Alpha himself sank slowly to one knee without seeming to decide to do it. The moon goddess had come. No wolf alive had seen her in living memory. She was a figure from old stories, from the prayers whispered before a hunt or a birth, not someone who walked among the packs. And yet here she stood, in the middle of the Blackthorn Great Hall, and her gaze was not on the Alpha or his kneeling son. Her gaze was on Elena. "Daughter," the goddess said, and her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, soft as moonlight and heavy as thunder. "Come forward." Elena's legs moved before her mind caught up, carrying her back into the hall, past the kneeling wolves, until she stood before the glowing figure. Up close, the goddess's eyes held galaxies, endless and calm, and when she looked at Elena, there was nothing but warmth in that ancient gaze. "You have been hidden for a long time," the goddess said, "even from yourself." Elena did not understand. "Hidden? I don't have a bloodline. I'm no one." "You believe that, because it is what you were told, not because it is true." The goddess lifted one hand, and silver light curled from her fingers like smoke. "Your mother carried the blood of the first Luna, the one who stood beside me at the very beginning, before packs had names or borders. That blood was hidden generations ago, to protect it from those who would misuse it, passed down quietly, waiting. It came to rest in you." Murmurs broke out across the hall, quickly hushed as the goddess continued speaking. "Tonight, the bond tried to give you to a mate," she said, "but you were never meant to wait for someone else's claim to know your worth. You are Luna by right of blood, not by another's choosing. It is time the truth was spoken aloud." The silver light around the goddess surged outward and wrapped itself around Elena, warm despite its glow, weaving through her hair and settling like a weight of pure light upon her brow. Elena gasped as it happened, feeling something deep inside her unlock, an awareness of her own strength that she had never been permitted to feel before. She had spent her whole life believing herself small. In this moment, she understood that she had simply never been allowed to stand up straight. A crown of moonlight settled over her, and every wolf in the hall, without exception, sank to their knees before her. She could feel the pull of pack instinct rippling through the room, an ancient recognition that could not be argued with or denied. Near the dais, Damien knelt with the rest, but his face had gone pale, his earlier certainty replaced by something close to horror. He stared at Elena, as though seeing her for the first time, though of course, he never truly had. "You," the goddess said, and though her voice remained gentle, it carried a weight that made Damien flinch. "Rejected the one the bond gave you, because you judged her worth by rank instead of by her heart. That choice is yours to carry. A rejection cannot be undone, not even by me. The bond you broke is gone. It will not return to you." Damien's throat worked as he tried to speak. "I didn't know. I didn't understand what she was." "You did not need to know what she was," the goddess said, "to treat her with kindness. That was the test, and you failed it before you ever knew there was one to pass." The words settled over the hall like a judgment no one could argue against. Damien lowered his head, and for the first time in his life as heir, no one moved to comfort him or make excuses on his behalf. The goddess turned back to Elena, her expression softening. "Lead them well, daughter. Lead with the kindness that was never shown to you. That is the only inheritance that matters." Then the silver light began to fade, drawing back into itself, and the goddess dissolved into moonlight and mist until only the ordinary candlelight remained, flickering back to life around the hall, as though it had never gone out at all. But everything had changed. Elena stood in the center of the room, the crown of moonlight no longer visible, but its presence unmistakable, in the way every wolf in the hall kept their eyes lowered, waiting for some word or gesture from her. The same women who had whispered about her ruined standing now would not meet her eyes. The same wolves who had scoffed at the moon's mistake now knelt with their foreheads nearly touching the floor. She thought of every year she had spent believing she did not matter, every meal eaten alone, every door quietly shut in her face, because an Omega with no name was not worth anyone's attention. She thought of the ache still lingering in her chest, where the bond had been torn away only minutes before. She could let that ache turn to bitterness. She could make every wolf who had ever looked down on her pay for it, now that she held the power to do so. She chose otherwise. "Rise," she said, and her voice, though quiet, carried across the hall as though it had been amplified by something beyond herself. Slowly, uncertainly, the wolves obeyed. She did not look at Damien for long. There was nothing left to say to him. His rejection had cost him something the goddess herself would not restore, and living with that loss would be its own lesson, one she did not need to teach him further. Instead, she turned to the Alpha, Damien's father, who watched her with an expression caught somewhere between fear and awe. "I will not seek to tear down what your pack has built," she told him. "But it will be built differently from here forward. No wolf will be looked down upon for the rank they were born into. No one will be made to feel unworthy of kindness in this hall again." The Alpha bowed his head, and this time, it was not only instinct that moved him, but respect. Elena walked toward the doors she had tried to leave through only minutes before, and this time, the hall parted for her, every wolf stepping aside without being asked. She paused at the threshold and looked back once at the hall full of people who had watched her be broken, and then watched her rise. Damien still knelt near the dais, his eyes fixed on the floor, unable to meet her gaze. She felt no triumph in his shame. She felt only the quiet, steady strength of knowing that whatever came next, she would not face it as someone waiting to be chosen. She had already been chosen, by something far older and far truer than a bond that could be broken with a few careless words. She stepped through the doors and out into the night, where the real moon hung full and bright above the trees, and for the first time in her life, Elena did not feel small beneath it. She felt seen, she felt whole, and as she walked forward into whatever her new life as Luna would bring, she knew, without a shadow of doubt, that she would never again let anyone convince her she was less than what she was. The end.